so you need to understand it. Something else, keep in mind, procedures are same this week. You need to find an article and post to the discussion board by Thursday at midnight. Respond to a classmate by Sunday. Something I didn't make very clear this last week, the article needs to be tied to sport, guys. And so for this week specifically, you need to find an article tied to contract law, and you need to explain it in relation to what we're talking about. And I'll talk more about that in the email that I send out. So um, here's the deal. Basically, for a contract to happen, you've got to have an offer. You've got to have somebody accept the offer. You've got to have things called considerations, which are actually what are in what's in the contract. And then in order to enforce that contract, it has to be legal, and the person signing or people signing the contract, they have to be they have to have the capacity in order to be able to sign it. We'll talk a little bit about that. So basically what an offer is just a promise to either do something or not do something. Okay, and so basically it creates the power to accept. So only one person basically has the offer, and it draws out stipulations. It could include something like price. It could include something like a number or a time, or it could be that you're just agreeing not to do something. For instance, not to compete if you leave a company. Once the offer's laid out there, then you have to have an acceptance. So whoever the offer is offered to, which is they have to basically decide either through words or conduct that they're accepting the terms of the agreement, the terms of the contract. Okay. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to look about doing this. There are oral contracts, there are written contracts. There's contracts that involve your acceptance through your silence or not silence. And then there's two different kinds of contracts. There's a bilateral contract, which means basically I'll do something in exchange for you doing something. And then there's a unilateral contract, which is just I'll do something and you'll give me this in return. More like like an insurance contract would be unilateral. Okay, a bilateral would be more like a contract that you and I would sign, or that an athlete would sign. So consideration is basically everything that goes inside the contract. Okay, it means there's got to be some kind of value or benefit that each party is given. And it can't be a gift, and it can't be something based on past performance, and it can't be something that's illegal. It has to be that I'm going to do this for you, so I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player and show up every day and play. And in return, you're going to pay me X amount, millions of dollars. So these are just some things that could go in a contract. Money for the promise to provide a meal, money for the promise to provide use of an arena, promise by a restaurant to host a Halloween party in exchange for having the restaurant decorated for Halloween. So this would be like if a company was like a decorating company. So there also can be an act or a promise not to act. It's called forbearance. So something like promise to pay a salary for the work of an employee, promise to release a worker from an employment contract if he or she agrees not to compete. So for instance, when I came out of grad school, I had a job with a company, a sales company. And one of the things they made us sign as part of working for that company was a non-compete clause, which basically meant if we left that company for a year, we could not compete with them doing the same kind of thing that they had taught us to do. So in order for it to be a contract to be binding, it has to be legal, which means it has to cover something legal. and the person or people signing it have to be competent. So minors can't enter into a contract. Somebody who's has mental issues can't agree into or can't enter into a contract. And so some typical things that are in them is it'll say who all is involved in the contract. Obviously will be in there, the amount of time, the promises, the warranties, representations, obligations, and duties, and there'll also be terms in there for letting you go or terminating you if you do certain things. There are contracts in college, so all of you who are student athletes sign a contract either as a national letter of intent or as a scholarship. Those are contracts. Those are saying that you're going to come play for X university and they're going to provide you X amount of money in scholarship money. Collective bargaining agreement. This is more in professional sports. It's a contract between the players union and the owners. There's a uniform players contract, which is a standard contract for all athletes. And guys, I'll post some of these on EagleWeb on Monday, some examples of some contracts for you to look at. You have endorsement contracts. So for instance, where a player endorses a product, okay, there has an agreement to what they're going to do, what they're going to get out of it, and understand that a lot of athletes make a ton of money just on endorsements. Okay, at the top of his game, Tiger Woods was making like $55 million just on endorsements. Okay, one of the most heavily endorsed athletes of all time. There's an athlete agent representation agreement. That's just the agreement that an athlete signs with their agent. Coaches have to sign contracts. Okay, and these are incredibly high. Okay, there's a ton of money involved in them. Okay, so it's going to give what the coach gets benefits wise. It's also going to get what the coach gets termination wise. So let me give you kind of an example. Kelvin Sampson, when he signed a contract to coach Indiana, the base salary was $500,000 per year, but these were just some of the benefits he got. He got the standard employee benefits. He got reasonable travel expenses associated with his work. He got 2 cars, 8 season tickets to regular home games, and up to 22 single game tickets. They reimbursed him for moving. They got outside marketing and promotional income associated with his work promoting the program. $600,000 the first year, $1.15 million the final year. Commercial endorsements and pay for summer camps. So that kind of gives you an idea of it's misleading to think that, you know, what you see is always what a coach is getting. But it also lays out why, you know, how you can let a coach go. Reasons for them to be able to be let go without cause. This is something, if you go into coaching, you're going to involve in game contracts. Okay, you have to send out contracts with who you're playing. It says where it is, what time it is. Event contracts, for example, hosting an event, hosting a tournament. These are things you'll have to sign. And so you'll also deal with waivers. You probably already signed waivers, but you should get waivers signed before you host a camp, for instance. Okay, this helps us lessen the liability if somebody gets hurt. There's use contracts, like for sport clubs or you join a gym. Okay, and all of these are invalid if they're signed by a minor. They mean nothing. Leases. Okay, if you play at a place that's not your home field, you may have to sign a lease, okay, to promise to play. Okay, you may have to enter into some kind of agreement to for who's going to do the maintenance of it. It may be like a rent. Okay, for instance, there are a lot of colleges that rent their arenas that they play in from the universities where they go to school at. So we've talked a lot about kind of how these things work. Now let's talk about how do we go about how do we resolve something when it goes south. So what a parole evidence rule is basically is that it's in writing. Okay, and basically it says we're going to have a contract in writing, and you can't, if it goes to court, you can't introduce uh, any kind of other information that's not in the terms of the agreement. There's also a statute of frauds, which basically says that there's three different kind of things. If you enter into these contracts, it has to be in writing. Anything that involves a sale, a mortgage, or a lease. Any contracts that can't be performed within a year, and any contracts for the sale of goods valued more than $500, you have to have a written contract. And so what happens if somebody, violates a contract? So there's a couple of things. There's compensatory damages. And this basically is the money that's necessary to make up whatever monetary loss a party has suffered due to the breach of a contract. So for instance, if an athlete has agreed to pay an agent an hourly rate for work that the agent does, and then the athlete breaches the contract to sign with another agent, the agent could sue and ask for compensation equal to the hourly rate in the contract for the time of the agent's work. So I'll say consequential damages. And this is basically monetary relief for a party's economic losses that were caused indirectly by the original breach of contract. So using the same example, an athlete signs with another agent. If this action caused other athletes to leave the original agent, then the agent could sue asking for damages basically relating to the losses of losing those other athletes or other agents or other athletes that were with that agent. There are liquidated damages, which are these are specific amount of damages that parties agree to within the contract itself. Okay, it basically means that these are things that have to happen that are in the contract. If the breach happens, this is what has to happen. You've got specific performance, which are like, you don't really see these as much in sport, but they're usually applied to situations that involve like a unique item, not an employment contract. And basically, it just basically means that you're going to go ahead and carry out whatever the contracted duties were. It's as simple as that. Even if you breach them, you're going to still carry them out. There's also this term is this duty to mitigate. And what this means basically, guys, is that even if I break a contract, okay, and something happens, you as the other party, you still have to try to lessen your losses as much as possible. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that I run a sprinkler company, and you run a minor league baseball field, and you contract me to do the sprinklers. And I go in there and kind of halfway do the job, and prior to a game, the field starts flooding. And, and I can't get out there to Monday to fix it. Well, you have a duty to try to mitigate those damages, meaning you have a duty to try to fix it yourself. Okay, you can't just let it sit there and flood and then try to charge me or sue me in court for all the damages that occurred while you could have been stopping it. So if we're going to resolve, these disputes, we can go to arbitration, okay, which is basically like a neutral third party, and this is binding. Okay, there is whatever this arbitrator decides, that's the law. We could also go to mediation, which is kind of an informal process when like a third party person tries to help us work out our differences without it being final or binding. Last couple things, guys, a minor can't enter into a contract, and a contract is voidable for these reasons. Okay, minor, adult has no choice but to sign, meaning you see this a lot with elderly people who are forced to sign stuff. Like if the words or conduct show intent not to be found in a contract, meaning that it's a bunch of gibberish nobody can understand. If somebody's intoxicated, if somebody's mentally incompetent, and all those things essentially make a contract voidable. And so remedies for some of this stuff, if we want to, we can force a defendant to perform the contract terms. So like a franchise agreement, we can make them pay us. We can refrain from engaging in activity that's prohibited in the contract. We can make them pay the debt. We can enforce a monetary penalty that's stated in the contract. There are a lot of ways to do this. There's also this concept of economic loss, meaning, we could lose reputation, or what are the actual costs due to the breach of contract that's not associated with just the contract, meaning harm to our reputation, harm to our business. And so some things you need to know just going forward is always get this in writing, whatever you do. Always read the contract. They're going to be forever hundreds and hundreds of pages long. It's worth reading it. I always keep contracts of it. And then always use good faith when negotiating a contract, meaning don't negotiate something that you can't do or that you can't uphold. Some other things, understand what the deadlines are for it. Make sure that you share contract information with those who need to know, meaning your staff, so they don't breach a contract that you get held accountable for. Try to resolve things that are issues as quickly and as fairly as possible. We don't want to go to court for this stuff, guys. And so we want to try to do our best to deal with that stuff.